welcome back to Delving into the Cold. This is Dee. I want to apologize. I know that it's been a few weeks since I got a podcast out, and that just has to do with the fact that I've been sick on and off for like the last 3 weeks. I had I had the flu, and then I had a virus, and now I've got like a lung infection, so I may still sound a little croaky, but I apologize. Also, I'm very sorry that it took me so long to get the Halloween special up on YouTube. My computer just kind of refused to do what it was supposed to, and so it was like one problem after another with that thing, and I eventually had to just use a completely different program to make the video, which made it a little bit janky, but I did my best, and hopefully this time I'll be able to work with the program better now that I'm a little bit more familiar with it. And then just one more thing before we get into the case. The next month or so is probably going to be a little iffy on podcast. I may get another 1 or 2 out after this one, and then I may just get 1 out after this one until the new year, because of the holidays, and I'm supposed to be moving soon, and it's just going to be a process to deal with. So it could be, kind of scarce the next month or so. Alright, all of that being said, let's get into the case for today. And it's going to be the Atlas vampire murder, or the murder of Lilly Lindestrom. Now, this took place in the Atlas neighborhood, or the St. Eriksplan neighborhood of Stockholm, Sweden, in 1932. And they're not sure if it happened like May the 1st or May the 2nd, but the crime was discovered May the 4th. Now, a little bit about Lilly. Lilly was a 32-year-old that lived in an apartment complex in Atlas. She was a prostitute, and she ran her business out of her apartment. And so that leads to the problem of there were fairly strange... that kind of leads to the possibility that there are going to be a lot of suspects, and not necessarily a pool that can be narrowed down very far, because as you can imagine, someone that's seeking the services of a prostitute is not going to be very open about that. She was not the only prostitute, however, that worked out of her apartment building. Her downstairs neighbor and best friend, Minnie Jansen, was also a prostitute, and Minnie was actually the last person to see Lilly alive. Lilly came down asking for condoms a couple of times on the night that she died. So Minnie was actually the one that reported the disappearance, or I guess the ultimate, the murder, to the police. So let's get into what the crime scene looked like. When the police came after being called by Minnie, who had not heard from or seen Lilly in what she considered to be an unusual amount of time, they entered the crime scene, and they found Lilly face down on the bed, naked. Her clothes were folded neatly in a chair that was right beside the bed. And they determined eventually that she had been dead for 2 or 3 days before the police got there. It was also determined that she had sex right before her death, because there was still a condom in her anus. And there was bodily fluids and things of that, nature all over the crime scene, but unfortunately forensics didn't really exist back then. Certainly DNA didn't. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head from repeated blows. But the strange thing about the crime scene, and the reason that it's called the vampire murder, is because the majority of her blood was removed from her body. They also found saliva on her neck and other parts of her body, which they found strange, and which further added to the vampire, I guess, myth. But probably the weirdest thing at the crime scene was a blood-stained gravy ladle near the body. And obviously the police were quite perplexed about that one. And so it should be known that the people in the building that Lilly lived in knew her quite well. They called her Call Girl because she was the only one in the apartment building with a phone. So it wasn't like whoever killed Lilly killed a pariah or something. Everyone knew her. A lot of people, really liked her. And Minnie especially was just devastated by her friend's death. So let's get into what happened the night of Lily's murder. She came to Minnie's apartment a couple of times that night looking for condoms because she had a client to entertain. But the last time she came, it was around 9 p.m. and Minnie recalls her coming down and she was only wearing a coat. She was wearing nothing underneath. And then when Lilly didn't call her the next day, and when she wouldn't answer her phone, and when she I'm sorry, not when she didn't call her, when she didn't, come to see her the next day, and when she wouldn't answer her door or a phone if she was called from a payphone, Minnie grew concerned because that just wasn't like Lilly. Minnie and Lilly kind of took care of each other because they both knew that they were in not the safest profession. So they tried to make sure that each other, was safe. And so as far as suspects, the police searched the entire neighborhood, and they actually interviewed 8 of Lily's clients, and nothing really came of it. But it's kind of agreed upon that her last client of the night is the one that murdered her, simply because of the way the body was found, how many bodily fluids were found, and things of that nature. And it just makes sense that her last client was the one who murdered her. Unfortunately, they never found a solid suspect. And since there wasn't DNA testing back then, they had no way to test all of the fluids that were found on the scene. Today, though, Lily's murder is still talked about. It wasn't a part of history that was just forgotten. It's still very much a part of Stockholm's, I don't want to say history because, again, she's still talked about, but it's a part of their past that they refuse to let, just kind of stay in the past. And her case is actually a part of the police museum in Stockholm. And so people today are still trying to figure out who hurt Lilly and trying to figure out what really happened. Alright, so let's talk about theories. Like I said, it's widely accepted that her last client was the one that killed her. But unfortunately, we don't know who that client was. There was no record keeping or anything. There was no one saw him. And I've read reports that when Lilly went down to Minnie's house for the last time, she was a little distressed or she was rushed, and that could be because she thought that the client was a little sketchy, or she'd had the client before and they kind of creeped her out, but she thought she could handle it. But he kind of made, her flustered. She was kind of worried. And again, those were just a few reports that I've heard. I don't think that there's a lot known about her demeanor the last time she saw Minnie. But if that was the case, then maybe she just got in over her head. Alright, so let's get to the question that I know that everyone is waiting for me to answer. Was it a vampire? Oh wait, I doubt it. I sincerely doubt it. I guess anything is possible. She was missing most of her blood, if not all of it. It did happen at night, and the murderer seemingly disappeared into thin air. So, I mean, I guess if it makes you, feel more comfortable thinking that it was a vampire than a human, go for it. I can't, 100% tell you that it wasn't a vampire. So, I just believe that Lilly was killed by a man who knew her habits. And the guy was clever enough to get away with it. But he did leave a messy crime scene. But you have to remember that forensics weren't a thing back then. So maybe he wasn't afraid. He didn't think that leaving all of his DNA and all of this evidence out would, result in him getting caught. And so he kind of had no fear in that sense. So, that's really it. There's just not a lot about this case, but I've always found this case interesting since the first time I've heard it. And, I think that it was one of those cases that had it have happened in present day, we would have been able to solve the case, super fast, especially with all the DNA that was left. As always, I would love to hear what you guys think. I'm going to try to get this video up as soon as possible, but I make no promises. You can email me at coldunsolvedmysteries@gmail.com. You can go to my Instagram and hit me up, whether that's following me or sending me a message. It's DEE9413. You can get on my Tumblr. It's DEE9191994, I believe. Or you can go to delvingintothecold.webnode.com. Alright guys, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.